Well, hello, everybody. Welcome into our second week of talking about Adobe After Effects and doing some fun stuff in Adobe After Effects, our weekly creative challenges. Last week, we talked about masking. We had a bunch of fun with that. As you might be able to see, I've changed my setup a little bit. It is still my same editing room, but I made it look a little bit nicer because I was not happy with the way it looked afterward last week. But you live and you learn. This week, we're going to take a look at some green screen stuff. We're going to talk about the process of green screening, kind of my thought process behind green screening. I've actually been sort of plunged into the green screen world a little bit more than I have in a long time over the past year or so. So it's fun. There's a lot. There's a lot of I don't want to say there's a lot of good green screen. There's a lot of bad green screen, but there is some good green screen. And when you can get good green screen to look good, it's really, really cool and it's really fun. But there's a lot of kind of steps to the process. Hello, chat. I see you over there. My chat is all the way over here, and my camera is all the way over here. So I'll be doing this when I interact with chat. Hey, General. Hey, Jack. Hey, Val. Good to see you again. Hope everyone's doing fine. Hey, guess what, guys? I'm up here outside of Philadelphia, and I'm really, really close to where the solar eclipse passes by today. So that'll be kind of fun. I'm probably going to take my kids and go try to see how much of it we can see. We're not quite in the complete dark zone, but it'll be fun. Speaking of eclipses, I have a graphic that I forgot to put on screen here. I'm going to drag it into After Effects. So this After Effects file, you can ignore this. This PSD is just something I'm dragging in for me. This After Effects file is in our day 2 or O2_day folder because it's our second day, of course, coming to you live and doing this stuff. There's a few video clips, a few green screen video clips that we'll use today. I don't know if we'll get to all of it because we only have 20, 25 minutes. So we'll cover as much as we can, and then we'll just stop when we run out of time, as you would expect. So before we actually begin doing some green screen stuff, I want to sort of put you in my headspace and what I'm thinking about and where I am and the general approach I have toward green screen in general. And it really begins before you even get into post-production, before you even get to this pull key section of green screening. It makes a massive difference the way you light your shot, the way you light your green screen, and even the camera you use and the way you shoot your footage. So, of course, having a well-lit shot with low noise, so being able to shoot at a lower ISO or at your camera's base ISO, if you're using well, technically every camera has a base ISO, but if you're shooting at like a higher-end camera or cinema camera, you probably know your camera's base ISO. Anything you can do to keep noise down is good. Light your subject well, get good edge lighting, all of that kind of stuff helps. And then probably one of the biggest things is most cameras that we use shoot 8-bit video. 8 bits of color information is 256 levels of color and tone in each of your color channels. If you can shoot 10-bit, that makes a massive, massive difference. Remember, we're chroma keying, which means we're targeting a color and telling After Effects, drop that color out, get rid of it. So the more color information we can feed to our editor, the more accurate and the more detailed all the hair selections and everything like that can get. So to be able to jump from shooting an 8-bit footage to 10-bit footage, you get 4 times the amount of data. So you go up to 1,024 levels of color in each of your color channels. It makes a massive difference. The other part of the process is being able to shoot in a codec or color space. It has to do with color, a chroma subsampling is what it's called. But the idea is to be able to shoot instead of most video cameras, most sort of amateur and prosumer style video cameras are going to shoot 420 video. If you can shoot 422 or 444, 444 is like raw footage just about. But 422, the way chroma subsampling works, without getting into the weeds, crazy. It gives you basically double the green detail in your video. And what color screen are we shooting on? Of course, it's a green screen. So when it comes to blue screen shooting, that there's other things you do when you're dealing with blue screen. But when we're dealing with green screen, the higher quality footage we can begin with, the better quality key you're going to be able to pull. So that brings us to then ingesting footage into something like After Effects and using, we're going to use the effect called Keylight right down here. We want to first pull our key. So we think about things like, is it flat footage? Is it log footage? Or is it something we've converted to Rec 709, which is the typical color space we view video in for most 8-bit, like your normal computer monitor, normal TVs. It's changing a little bit with all the HDR stuff that's coming out, but we don't need to get into all that right here. I like to denoise the footage if at all possible. We would create a garbage mat, right? Get rid of all the big stuff first. Kind of, if it's Photoshop, think about it like we'd be creating a lasso selection first around our object and just get rid of all the stuff that's easy to select. And then a core mat and an edge mat. And then sometimes we stack mats, or in some software, it's called additive masking. Now, we're not going to do all these different things. We're pretty much going to focus on a garbage mat and doing a combination of a core and edge mat because we just simply don't have the time to get into everything else today. Once you pull your key and you have your black and white alpha, then becomes the process of despilling. And this is where you're standing in front of a green screen or you have an object in front of the green screen, right? Our video here, let's say we have this product that's in front of a green screen, and there's going to be all this spill, right, up onto our white platform and around the edges and on the black caps. There's despill or there's spill, so we need to despill and get rid of that. So that's what this process is: targeting that green, reducing the background color, and very often even we like to try to convert that spill to either the color of the new background over which we're placing our object or the color of the edges of the object. So if you have a guy with dark hair, right, like this shot here, this green screen, we wouldn't just want to make the green go to gray. It'd be better if we could convert it to the color of his hair. But you will see in a lot of movies and things like that where they're doing these heavy VFX, they're going to have the actors a lot of times dress in monochromatic clothing, because if I desaturate this green fringe along the edge here, if I desaturate this just to a very dark gray, it's still going to look totally natural, like a light hitting a black shirt. But if he had a bright yellow shirt or a bright red shirt or something like that, then you just have another thing to think about and contend with. So when and where you can, when you're shooting green screen stuff, if you can have more monochromatic colors. Now here we do have this pink, which would be its own thing to deal with. But that does make a difference. So we go from pulling the key to despilling and also fixing fringe luminance. A lot of times you'll see a green screen and there'll be like just a dark edge along, the person's skin, particularly if they lift their hand up in front of like a really bright background or something behind them. You'll see this dark fringe. We want to be able to get rid of that stuff. And then blending. So we're not going to get into blending much today, but that's where you're matching the brightness, contrast, saturation, color tone, and black point of your keyed object and your background. And then focus on things like light wrapping. You can create alpha mats and all kinds of cool sort of live updating masks and things like that that can help create this light wrapping and halation and blooming that you would naturally and normally see wrap around an object. So that's sort of the process. We're not going to go through all these things today because, again, we don't have that much time. So we're going to attack this kind of quick from the get-go. So I'm going to turn on my green footage. And the first thing I think about is this log footage or is this Rec 709 footage? So log footage is super low contrast. If this was log footage, I'm going to actually lock up our process in the back just so I don't see it. If this was log footage, it would look a little bit more like this. If I can spell Lumetri here, I'm going to drag Lumetri color correct onto our video, and I'm going to open up the curves, and I'm just going to crank up my black, and I'm going to drop the white, and just drop the contrast a lot. So log footage is probably going to look more like this. Now, the general rule with green screen is the punchier your color, right? A lot of contrast, a lot of saturation. That's going to be a harder, crispier edge. If it's a softer green, a little bit less saturated, it's going to be a softer edge. Now, softer edge is generally what's more desirable. Think about hair. We don't want that to be a hard, chunky, crisped edge. We want that to be soft. We want to be able to capture a lot of detail. So reducing the contrast can be a good way to go, or some people like to go in and change the profile through which they're looking at the color, or do what's called a color space transform. We're not going to get into all that today. We're going to deal with the footage. This is just off of a Canon R5, so there's nothing crazy about it in terms of being like, oh, this is a perfect cinema, camera shot or something where we're taking it off an $80,000 camera. We're not doing that here. So let's begin. We're going to use a tool called Keylight. And over here in effects, you can see we have Keylight, but there's actually something better. Under animation presets, here under image utilities, we have Keylight and then the cleaner and the advanced spill suppressor all packaged into one. And it just drops all three of the effects at once. So we'll shut off the key cleaner. We're just going to turn on Keylight. I'm going to collapse the about because we don't need to see that it's from Foundry. We know that Adobe's got it. And we're going to take a look at what we've got here. Now, I'm probably going to set this to final result. We're going to go back to intermediate, and I'll show you why in a little bit. But what we do is we take our screen color, and we're going to use the eyedropper, and I'm going to sample kind of a lighter green here near his shoulder. Now, look at the eyedropper tool. Look very closely at the eyedropper tool. If I hold down my command key, that'd be control on the PC, the eyedropper gets a little bit bigger. And what's happening is it's just saying, instead of sampling like one exact point, it's going to take a slightly bigger sample and sort of average it all together. So I just find that it just helps get a more general and usually a better selection in terms of our color. So when we select that, you can see, bang, we've knocked out the white, we've knocked out the green. If I set this to screen matte, this is going to show me the alpha channel of what we're doing here, right? The white is what we can see. The black is what we can't see. Now, there are a couple issues, and there are a couple kind of cool tools that After Effects gives us here to be able to clean this up a little bit more. And the view mode that I like to jump into kind of right away is called status. And what status does is it basically says, you want your alpha matte to be black where stuff is not selected or not seen, and white where we see stuff, right? We want to see the guy. We don't want to see the background. And when I click on this, I can see, first of all, there's a lot of problems with the white area of him. There's a lot of stuff that's going to be, even if you don't entirely see the background, it's going to look like you probably see those dancing pixels. Sometimes that's a chroma issue. Normally it's a despilling issue. We'll talk about that later. But at the very least, we can tell that we have some issues here in terms of our background not being solid black. So this is good information for us to have. Let's open up our screen matte where we dial in the matte, and we're going to begin by clipping the black. So as we clip the black, you only need to go up a couple ticks, something like that, maybe to 11. There we go. We've clipped the black, and let's clip the white a little bit more, and we'll be pretty aggressive. So we're going to move the white back until we get to maybe something like that. Notice we still have this chunk over here. That we can get rid of. This is really going to be our garbage matte. So we're going to get rid of that in a moment. Now let's set this back to final result for a moment. And what I want to do is I want to shrink or grow our matte. I'm going to grow it. I'm going to grow it. I'm going to grow it just like this. Now you can see that, well, this is kind of weird. I'm seeing gray, not green from the green screen. And the other thing that you're going to see if you start playing through this video, I don't know how well it's coming through our stream here, but if you've done any chroma keying or any green screen work, this is the bane of the green screen existence. Is down here in the darks, it looks like all this noise has suddenly been introduced. It's dancing with noise. Let's see if it allows me to use my microphone. There we go. And you can see it's got all this noise that's jumping around down there. Well, what's going on? Because if I shut off Keylight, there is no noise down there, right? Our footage is shockingly clean. Well, what's happening is whenever you use just the Keylight effect, there is a despilling that automatically comes with it. And that despilling is down here called replace. It's this replace method, replace color. If you want to get rid of this dancing noise, you just need to set replace method to source. So get me back to my source, right? Don't try to do any despilling here. We're going to use our advanced spill suppressor to do some despilling. And sure enough, our green background comes back and all of that dancing noise goes away. So that's a problem that you can fix very quickly and somewhat easily. Now that I'm seeing this, I want to make my matte grow a little bit more. And you can see it's basically like quickly rotoscoping this guy. And we cut away all the stuff we know that needs to be black, other than this little chunk up here that's sticking out. But we'll touch that right now, actually. Over here, we've got source crops. We can crop left, right, top, bottom. Let's just crop to the right here. And I'm going to just pull this over. Now, the edge color is black, so I can't see what I'm doing. So I'll usually come in here and set this to something bright, like red. And now I can go ahead and just pull this back. Now, I'll usually scrub through my footage really quickly just to make sure if his hand moves out or anything like that. You can see right there, we're clipping his fingers. So we would just make sure we don't clip his fingers, right? Something like that. And that's good. Now, I don't want to see any color. I want to see, frankly, I want to see background. So let's see how this works for a second. Let's come back to our project bin and just grab some footage to throw behind him. Let's just grab this footage, whatever. It doesn't really need to be anything fancy. And we can see, great, it's dropped in behind him, this big blurry footage, but we still see that red, which obviously is a problem. So what we want to do, go back to our footage. We're going to call this subject, just so I know, just so you know what I'm clicking on. We're working on our subject. What we'll do is we're going to go back to our effect controls, and you have this edge color alpha. We'll just set that down to 0, and that gets rid of that color. So now we've created a nice garbage matte. It's not targeting the fine details of the edge. We're just making sure that we're not going to have like a random clump of green floating out in the ether over here, or like that weird light thing that was popping up over here. And once we've done this, we can rename this. So just hit the Enter key, and it's going to allow you to rename. We're going to call this not garage, but garbage matte, like that. And what I want to do is grab another instance of the Keylighter, the Keylight, I should say. Keylighter was something totally different. So here, this is going to be our primary matte. So I'll just call this matte. Now, we could do like a core matte and an outside edge matte. We're not going to get into all that right here. The point is, now that we just have this little bit of green left, we can take our screen color and this new instance of Keylighter, instead of having to focus on all this green, and you can see it's like light green and dark green and all that kind of stuff, all this instance of Keylight has to worry about is this little bit of green all around his body. So we'll take this. I'm going to hold down Command or Control again. Let's click by the shoulder, and we just knock all of that away. So we already have a pretty solid matte. But what I want to do, I'm actually going to set this back to intermediate result. By the way, I should have explained this before. If you just set this to intermediate result, it also does not apply, where is it here? It does not apply the despilling. So when you set this to final result, that applies the despilling, and you get that kind of crunchy, weird noise. If you just set it to intermediate result, it also doesn't apply despilling. So I'm going to do the same thing here, intermediate result, just like that. And you can see, sure enough, look, we got green on the edges. Totally fine. Don't worry about it. We got it. We're going to take care of it. The main thing that I'm concerned with is it looks like there's still, you see this like ring of stuff that's left behind around the hair. We want to go and just make sure we knock that stuff out and kind of clean up these edges a little bit more. So let's get on with that. In fact, I am actually going to zoom in here like so, because we really want to be focused on the hair. Around the shirt, it's not nearly as vital. Normally you would create separate mats for these things. But again, as I've said a number of times, we don't have time to go through all that today. But we're going to focus on pulling a nice key for the hair and despilling that and seeing how it looks for us. So let's focus on this junk that's hanging out over here first. So what we'll do is we'll go to Screen Matte. Again, this is our matte, and we can see, in fact, if I go back to status, we can see there's a bunch of stuff out here that is not the way we want it to be. So we know that one of the things that we're still going to do here with this matte is come down to Screen Matte, and we're going to clip the blacks until they look kind of solid black, okay? Let's go back to intermediate result real quick, and we can see we got rid of that ring thing. And now let's focus on the hair a little bit here. So if I go back to Screen Matte, I'm looking at the hair. There's a little bit of blur. We haven't applied any pre-blur. We haven't softened our matte, right? If I soften this, you can see it's just going to soften everything, which there are times when that's useful when you're trying to just blend some things together. But when we're trying to preserve some detail here in the hair, we probably don't want to do that. How's everybody in the chat doing? I feel like I've gone on a monologue here for the last 10, 15 minutes. I have hardly interacted with the chat. Robert, how are you? Keys, how you doing? Tori, how you doing? Uma, good to see you. Good to see you, General. I remember you from last time. I hope everybody's doing well. So back to this, we can also clip the white. So clipping the white is going to allow us to sort of fill out these white areas in the middle that we don't want to have like this. We really don't want that shadow to be there. Now, part of the issue is if I completely fill out the white to get the shirt and the neck where I want it to be, we've pretty much lost all of that detail in our hair. So I'm going to sort of ignore the issues that are happening down here and pretend like we're doing another key lighter later. That's going to take care of that. Rather, I want to focus on the hair and really, really try to dial this in. So I'm going to bring some of the white back, something like so. And we're going to keep our blacks clipped. You can clip what's called the rollback, and this kind of gives you this, it just softens the stuff around these details. Whether or not that's something we want, probably not. And then despotting black and white, we really don't need to worry about them right now. I am, again, going to replace, I'm just going to set this to source. I don't think it's going to do anything here because, again, we're viewing our intermediate result, not the final result. So the despilling, again, we've put the kibosh on that. And then in terms of inside and outside mask, I almost never use them. I'll manually mask before I use the inside outside here. And then foreground and edge color correction, we're probably not going to touch them too much because what I want to move along to is the key cleaner. So key cleaner is going to take your matte and sort of bring back some of those edge details. So with this turned on now, we can go back to our matte and we can say, oh, you know what, maybe I can clip the whites a little bit more. And let me see what that does up in the hair. It's very distracting because we're still getting all the green. Again, try to ignore that for a second. We're going to get to advanced spill suppressor in a second. And let's leave that like that. And actually, let's move along to advanced spill suppressor. So when we turn this on, we're going to see all the green go away right away. Now, the problem is we still have this kind of glowy stuff. We really, really want to try to get rid of that glowy stuff as much as we can. But what I want to do before I do that is instead of doing standard, let's use the ultra method. Ultra, to me, I just think it's better. So let's shut off our matte for a second and shut off our garbage matte. And we'll even shut off the key cleaner as well. Let's zoom out here. And we can see that the advanced spill suppression is targeting this form of light green. And we can see what it's doing to the green background. It should be desaturating all of it, but it's not really. It's making this super light green, pretty much white. And then over here, it's just still very much green. So we have this tolerance slider. We want to increase the tolerance. Usually it takes all the way up to 100 until you desaturate everything. So just punch that up and we get rid of all the proper green. Now, part of the reason that this is important is because not only do you have edge spill, but you will also have things like, let me turn the matte back on, like down here under his chin, right? That's green. We don't want to see that. Also down here on like the bottom of the arm, green. Also don't want to see that. So cranking this advanced spill suppression up and doing that, you can see it's just going to get rid of that green. Now, the key is not quite right down there, the key we pulled, but try to ignore that for a second. Mainly focus on the fact that it's not green because we're tinkering with the hair. So now that we have spill suppression and our key cleaner on, we can go back to our matte. I'm going to save my file here because it never hurts to save. Let's go ahead and try adjusting our whites and maybe unclip some of the whites, see how that looks. If we take some of that clip, roll back, what if we shrink or grow this a little bit? How does that look? Now, this usually just shrinks all the sides down. We could also bump up the clipping of the white. That'll take away some of that glowiness of our hair, something like that. I'm actually going to get rid of the shrink. Oops, I'm going to get rid of the shrink grow. Let's completely undo that because that just looks bad. And now we still have the glowing. So this is where edge color correction can help us. So we go edge color correct, and we have this brightness option. So let's just turn the brightness down. Let's see what this does. Is it going to help us? If we take down saturation a little bit, we can reduce the edge grow. We can reduce the contrast on the edge, something like so. It still is not quite where I would want it to be. But here's something that can also help with your background. We can scale the background like this, and we can position the background because if he's positioned over a lighter color background, as you can see, well, it doesn't look nearly as bad. Oh, you know, I can also take him, right? He's green screen. So we can move him over. And all of a sudden, all of that glowing, well, it's always going to look good when you're zoomed out. All of a sudden, much of that glowing has disappeared that we see around the hair. So just for the last minute or so here, what I do want to show you is once you have this set like this, you can go back to your subject and you can begin adding things like Lumetri color. And through Lumetri color, you can correct things like here under curves. We can just raise the contrast, or I'm sorry, reduce the contrast by raising the black point and reducing or lowering the white point a little bit. something like so. You could even come to hue versus saturation. You could target your greens in here. You could pull those greens down. That's not a bad idea if you're getting green spill that you're still having trouble with. Come into basic corrections. We can adjust the color temperature, try to make him blend a little bit more, maybe bump some of that contrast back up, reduce the exposure just a little bit, something like so. That looks actually kind of bad. Let's reduce the temperature adjustment that we made just a little bit, something like that. So using Keylight and using your key cleaner, which is just going to help with those edges, particularly if you got a lot of hard edges, and then that advanced spill suppressor, it makes a big difference in terms of your green screening process. But I think the most important thing about green screen work is bearing all of this in mind, and trying to have in your mind a process set of here's my plan of attack. We're going to pull our key, we're going to despill, and then if we're compositing this or putting it, whatever we're doing with it, there's going to be some level of blending that needs to happen. Keys says, in many ways, this is why a blue screen is preferable, not as bright and wavelength is narrower. Well, not necessarily, Keys. So part of the problem with blue screen, 422 footage carries that extra green information. So if you're going to try to pull key from blue, you need to shoot usually in what's called 444 video, or 444 color space, because you need that extra blue color to be carried with your footage as well. So blue key if you're working on the Green Goblin, you're going to need to do that over blue screen because he's green. So there are times when blue is necessary, but there are reasons why green is used for the vast majority of this stuff. The main thing is shooting high quality footage over a well-lit green screen and lighting your subject well. So guys, that's going to be it for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for being here, and I hope you come back next week as well. Thank you.